Our main ministry objective, at least the first one that we feel like we were called to, is touching one main issue that I personally began to see several years ago in the church, and that was simply the fact that the doctrines and overall beliefs and praxis that modern Christianity, the Christianity that I grew up in at least, is not the rules that we say that we play by, and the doctrines and theology and worldview that we have, what we think of as God's will, is not actually based on the words in red. It's not based on the things that Jesus said. We don't get our doctrines from Jesus' parables. We seem to be getting them from somewhere else. And it's unimportant where those come from. It's fine to extract a doctrine or a belief system from anywhere in the Bible that you want to, but it at least has to pass the test of not contradicting things that Jesus himself said. If a doctrine that we hold can't pass the acid test of not contradicting something that Jesus taught, then it's a false doctrine. Let's say we just go read some verses in Romans, and just out of those verses, we create a brand new doctrine just out of those verses. That's fine, we can do that. But if we then find that the doctrine we created seems to contradict some other passage from a previous chapter in Romans, or from another book Paul wrote, like Ephesians, or a book that another one of the apostles wrote, like John, then we need to look at that doctrine again and rethink it. Maybe it's a false doctrine, because something Paul said somewhere in Romans shouldn't contradict something he said somewhere else in Romans, or something he said in Ephesians, or something John said in one of his books. And it definitely shouldn't contradict something Jesus said. So, again, if we're going to go to any part of the Bible and extract some doctrine out of it, we have to compare it to Jesus' own words and make sure it at least doesn't contradict anything he said. So I'd like to go ahead and read through our white paper here. I've listed some examples of false doctrines that are common. For example, a message that leads listeners to believe that Jesus wasn't interested in our performance or won't reward our efforts is an obvious contradiction to what he taught in the parable of the 10 virgins, for instance, or the parable of the talents. And all parables where there are servants, subjects, day laborers, or slaves that are working and getting paid for their work, or being punished for inadequate performance or failure to go along with the program, completely obviously contradicts a doctrine that teaches that Jesus is not interested in our performance or effort or hard work, or that he doesn't reward what we do. Okay? So, in that case, Paul in Romans or Ephesians or anywhere else can't possibly be teaching that God is not interested in your performance, because several of Jesus' parables clearly teach that he is interested in your performance. The idea that Jesus wasn't interested in his followers, you and I, going out of our way to do, quote, good deeds, clearly contradicts the parable of the Good Samaritan, for instance, or the rich man and Lazarus, or the point Jesus made in Matthew chapter 25 with his sheep and the goats analogy. These parables and many other places within Jesus' own teaching clearly tells us that God is interested in our sacrifices, in our good deeds on behalf of other people. And that's not to speak of James chapter 2. In James chapter 2, James clearly enunciates that a person who doesn't do good deeds, right, by giving necessary things to people who are in need, brings our own salvation into question. That's clearly what James says in James chapter 2. Another idea here, the idea that salvation is merely personal, that we're only responsible for our own lives, or that we only need God's general forgiveness in some way, or that we only need forgiveness for some kind of nebulous, overarching, original sin that we are helplessly born into, like Reformed Calvinism teaches, clearly contradicts almost everything Jesus taught. Calvinism, for instance, completely falls apart if you compare it to almost anything Jesus ever said. And almost all of modern Western doctrine and beliefs within Christianity are based on or profoundly influenced by Calvinism, whether you like that or not. Modern Western Christianity, and now modern Christianity all over the world, has been so influenced by Calvinism, it's almost impossible to take Calvinism out of it. If you believe anything that's taught in a typical everyday evangelical church anywhere, your beliefs have been thoroughly influenced by Calvinism and based on Calvinism, whether you're aware of it or not. Whether you believe in all of that predestination and once saved, always saved stuff, we have been profoundly influenced by Calvinism, whether we like it or not. The idea that it's not necessary to seek out forgiveness from people we've hurt along the way or wronged in some way, that completely goes against many things Jesus taught, like the example of leaving your gift at the altar in Matthew chapter 5. The idea of personal salvation, the individualism of I'm only responsible for my own salvation. God's not going to judge me for someone else in their life. That goes against many things Jesus said. It goes against the main teaching behind the Lord's Prayer, for instance. It goes against almost the entirety of Matthew chapter 18 and the parables that are in there and the things Jesus said there.